G'day, ZiggyD here. No doubt most of you Fallout fans have already heard that Fallout 4 has indeed been officially finally announced after some of the teasers and leaks and things that were posted previously. We now have an official confirmation that Fallout 4 is on its way and that we're likely going to be getting some more information at E3. Recently, Bethesda released a teaser trailer that shows off some of the potential locations in the game, as well as some interesting flashbacks to the pre-war sort of scenario. This could mean that we're going to have some gameplay situations where we maybe play someone before the war and someone after the war, maybe even the same person, potentially getting frozen in one of the vaults. That sort of thing has been done in other games. So, pretty interesting stuff. There's been a bit of discussion on the internets about the engine that is being used for the game based on the trailer, and also the graphical fidelity of the game as well has been a bit of a hot topic of discussion. So guys, in this video I'm going to share some of my thoughts on the look of the game based on the trailer, and also some of the potential implications of the choice of engine. So first let's talk about the graphical fidelity shown off in the trailer and also the overall look of the game from what we've seen so far. Now this is only a very short trailer and it might not be anywhere near representative of the final title obviously, but based on what we've seen so far, the first thing that really jumped out at me was overall this looks to be a much more colourful game. Now, Fallout is set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, so you can expect a fair bit of desert and stuff like that, but a wasteland doesn't necessarily have to be entirely brown or yellow filtered, or those green filters or yellow filters that we've seen in the previous titles can get a little bit dull and grating over time. We've seen some pretty colourful potential locations in the trailer shown off here, and I really quite like that. I like some of these more vibrant colours. I like the flashbacks to pre-war where things are very vibrant, and then a less vibrant future, post-apocalypse of course, but with, you know, humanity or society is flourishing and growing out of this wasteland and starting to sprout out these little bastions of colour in the world. I quite like that, and I think it'll make for a much more interesting game to be involved in. In terms of the overall graphics of the game, it's a Bethesda-looking title. I think a lot of people were expecting or hoping for their minds to be blown. I think a lot of people probably just came off of playing Witcher 3, which overall is a pretty fantastic looking game, and compared to that, this game, not as good looking. Now, I don't think the trailer was all that bad looking. I think a lot of people are saying that it looks terrible and that it looks rubbish, but I think overall the gameplay shown in the trailer looks pretty good, and I think it is probably actually going to be quite representative of what the actual gameplay will be. These seem to be, rather than pre-rendered CGI trailers, these seem to be captured in-engine. And if that is the case, then I think Bethesda should be applauded for actually showing a realistic impression of what the game will look like at launch. So this kind of segues into the discussion of the potential engine that the game is going to be running on. It looks like it's probably going to be running on the same sort of engine that Bethesda have been working with for quite a while now. A heavily modified version perhaps of the Skyrim engine, or even some of the previous Fallout engines. Now this was initially, to my disappointment, I was, like many people, hoping for a brand new engine built from the ground up, because that would allow them to do, move away from some of the restrictions the previous games had. I mean, I'm sure you guys can recall times where in Skyrim you were engaged in an epic civil war battle, something that would be written about in the history books for years to come, and it involved 6 people fighting 6 people. There's some disappointing restrictions on the engine, and it can also result in some of the aesthetic things that I think people are complaining about in this trailer, such as sort of like canned-looking movements, a little bit awkward movement of the models and things like that. It's a bit disappointing to potentially learn that there's not going to be a brand new engine for this game, and I think that's what we're getting from the trailer. Now that said, Fallout New Vegas was released a long time before Skyrim, and Skyrim is, undoubtedly a much better looking game. They've done a lot of work to their sort of proprietary engine since the release of Fallout New Vegas with Skyrim. So if we are getting a modified version of the Skyrim engine, then that is still a big step up from what we've played in terms of Fallout in the past. So if Bethesda is sticking with a modified version of their previous engines, now that's not all inherently negative. As CoCarnage pointed out on the recent episode of Dropped Frames, that could actually mean that instead of dedicating a ton of money and man-hours to the development of a brand new engine, all of that time and money saved could instead be put into actual gameplay, the creation of tons of good writing, like that money could be put towards writers and voice actors, quest design, overall filling out the world in a much better fashion. So we could be getting an overall better game. Now, it's always a balancing act. Obviously, the engine does have limitations, and we may still be restricted by some of those limitations. But if they've put a bunch of that time instead into trying to make the best damn game they can on that existing engine, then we could end up with a better product overall. Now, budgets are limited, and the development of a new engine is very expensive in terms of time and money. And if we had move to a new engine, there is the potential that we get a very pretty and less restricted, but all-round more shallow game. Now, the other thing to consider when it comes to engine is also the modding scene. This is probably one of the most important things when it comes to Bethesda titles. I mean, like many of you, I buy these games only partially for the actual built-in campaign scenario thing created by Bethesda. It's only like a quarter of the game for me. The actual modding potential of these games is what gives them their real longevity. I mean, I've played many times more hours of modded Skyrim than I have of vanilla Skyrim. So what does a new versus an old engine mean for modding? Well, if they were sticking with a modified version of an older engine, it means that we're going to get a whole bunch of the existing mods made for Skyrim and the previous Fallout games ported over to Fallout 4 very quickly after launch. So that means the initial base of mods that we're going to have to play around with, or going to be able to explore and adapt to the new game within the first couple weeks, within the first couple of months of launch, are going to be much greater. There's going to be a much more massive library of these mods. We've seen this with the previous titles where these mods were ported forwards by mod developers into the new games, and a similar engine means that is much easier to do. Now, on the flip side of things, having a new engine means that modders have a lot more potential with what they can do, as long as Bethesda carries forwards their existing support for modders. So that could mean that more mind-blowing, more fancy, more involved mods could be created on a new engine. So the long-term potential is maybe a little lower with the modified version of the existing engine. But if we do move forwards with a modified version of the existing engine, then we do at least start off with a whole bunch more mods. So, either way, there are some positives and some negatives either way to having a new or an old engine. But my initial impression was that, oh no, we're not getting a new engine. I was almost shattered until I started to think about it a bit more, and it's maybe not all doom and gloom. Anyway, guys, that's some of my thoughts on modding, the look of the game, and, the potential of being on a modified version of the old engine versus being on a new engine. I'm keen to hear what you guys think. Leave your comments in the comments below and I'll check them out and maybe we'll have a bit of a discussion down there. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.